Hi everyone, welcome back to Oneg Shabbat. Today we'll be discussing Parashat Mishpatim. Now, Parashat Mishpatim holds many laws and many different aspects. What I'd like to show today is a different view to show the chidushim of Parashat Mishpatim. Now, when we see a chidush, meaning a chidush based on what was before, in order for us to understand what was before the Torah, here we need to use a little bit of history, a little bit of archaeology, a little bit of Assyriology. The science of digging and excavating and archaeologists in the Middle East is called Assyriology. It's a science that's been over the last few hundred years, and Baruch Hashem, it has helped us a lot with learning the Torah itself. I like to say that the blessing that Hashem gave us is the fact that archaeologists were able to go into the Middle East about 150 years ago and to dig up so many things to help us learn Torah before all the political madness that went on there. It was much a blessing of Hashem that we were able to see these things, to see these archaeological finds, to help us understand the Torah. One of the significant finds, which we'll be discussing today, is the code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was the king of Bavel around the time of the Avot. We're talking about 18th century BC, around that. Now, what Hammurabi helps us is to understand the standards which were back in the day. We see his laws, we see what people thought. When we see that, we can compare it to the Torah, and we can see what the Torah is trying to teach and what the deep idea is. I want to show that through one law, and to show that this small law, first of all, we can understand it well if we know what the Torah is fighting against, and also we can understand the deep idea behind it. I'm talking about Perek Kaf Aleph. Perek Kaf Aleph, we see the din in Pasuk Kaftet of Shor Nagachu Mitmol Shel Shom, what we call Shor Mu'ad, a shor which we know had a problematic background. If he kills, the shor yisakel v'gam be'alav yumat, or kofer. Now the Torah says something very interesting in Pasuk Lamed Aleph, o ben igach o bat igach kamishpat hazeh yaseh lo. It doesn't matter if he does a ben or a bat, kamishpat hazeh yaseh lo. What is a ben? What is a bat? A ben seems to be the son or the daughter. But what's the chidush? If you kill a person, you kill a person. What does it matter if he's ben mitzvah, lav bar mitzvah? What's the difference? So Rashi al Pi Midrash says here, the pasuk is coming lerabot, even if he's katan, you would have thought he's katan, maybe he wasn't careful, maybe he's not the same legal status, kamash malan, it's the same thing. But if we look at the Hammurabi Codex, we can understand what exactly this pasuk is saying. According to Hammurabi, we do midah keneged midah. If my shor kills someone else's son, then God forbid, the punishment is the execution not of me, but rather of my son. If I kill someone's daughter, God forbid, the execution will be midah keneged midah with the children. That is what Hammurabi states as a law. What's the philosophy behind this law? The idea is that children belong to the parent. Just like the parent has mitaltelin, real estate that belongs to him, his children and his family belong to him as well. And therefore you can punish a person by taking away his children. His children belong to him, so when you're punishing the children, you're actually punishing the parent. The Torah fights against this. Parents do not own their children. Parents have responsibilities over their children. Parents need to educate their children. Parents do not own their children, God forbid. And therefore, o ben igach, o bat igach, kamishpat hazeh yaseh lo. Doesn't matter if you kill someone's son or someone's daughter, the din is the same din. The person will be punished is you, the owner of the cow, or the owner of the shul. You will be the one who's punished, the owner of the bull, not your children. Your children do not belong to you. It is not their sin. And this is an idea where we find in many places in Torah, the idea of fighting this terrible idea that children belong to their parents. I'd like to show a few parashiyot over Tanakh that emphasize exactly this. The first parasha I would like to look at is in Sefer Dvarim. Two different parashot. The first parasha is Parashat Ben Sorer Umoreh in Perek Kaf Aleph. In Perek Kaf Aleph in Sefer Dvarim, we learn about a son who has ben sorer umoreh, איננו שומע בקול אביו ובקול אמו, ויסרו אותו ולא ישמע עליהם. He doesn't listen. What do they have to do? They take him to ziknei iro, and only then can the child be punished. What's the chidush of this terrible parasha? Parasha which Chazal say never was. What's the chidush of this parasha? The parents cannot do anything to their child unless ziknei iro, unless the Beit Din allows it. The fact that he's your child doesn't mean you can do whatever you want to him and God forbid execute him. Unlike Hammurabi's rules, unlike the rules in the ancient world that claim that children are owned by their parents and the parents can do whatever they want to the children, the Torah says no. Your child doesn't listen, you take him to trial. You cannot make that decision. The same thing we see in דברים, in פרק כ"ד, פסוק ט"ז, לא יומתו אבות על בנים, ובנים לא יומתו על אבות, איש בחטאו יומת. You cannot kill a child for the sin of his parent. Now, חז"ל were מתקשה in this פסוק, פשיטה. Why would you kill a child for the parent's fault, for the parent's violation of the law? And therefore they say, the פסוק that is talking about דיני עדות, לא יומתו בנים בעדות אבות, ואבות לא יומתו בעדות בנים. From here we learn the idea of you not being able to testify against a relative. But the פשט הפשוט, הפשטות של מקרא, is telling us that you cannot punish a child for the father's sin because of what we just said. The child is not owned by the father, and goes vice versa as well. If the child is at fault, it doesn't mean the father needs to be executed for it. The child is his own person. The father does not own him. And this pasuk is not so simple to see people doing it, because in Divrei Yamim Bet, we see that the Tanakh has to tell us that this was actually performed. Divrei Yamim Bet, in Perek Kaf Hei, we see the story of Amatzia. Amatziah's father Yoash was murdered by his servants, and we see here ben 25 שנה במלך אמציה, 29 שנה מלך בירושלים, and he does all the good. in פסוק ג' ויהי כאשר חזקה הממלכה עליו, ויהרוג את עבדיו ומקים את המלך אביו, ואת בניהם לא המית, כי ככתוב בתורה בספר משה אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור לא יומתו אבות על בנים, ובנים לא יומתו על אבות, איש בחטאו ימותו. Which means the Tanakh feels the need to emphasize that Amatzia did not execute the children of the people who sinned, because the children are not owned by their parents. Parents have responsibility toward their children. Parents need to educate their children. Tanakh is very big on that. But parents do not own their children. And we see that in the parasha of Shora Mu'ad, and therefore, לא יומתו אבות על בנים, ובנים לא יומתו על אבות. We see that, או בן ייגח, או בת ייגח, in Shora Mu'ad, as I said, we see it through the entire Torah. And dafka through understanding Hammurabi's law, dafka from understanding what was during the Torah, what the Torah came to fight against, we can understand the bigger chidush of the Torah. This isn't just a law, this is a law with a very deep philosophy behind it. Children are their own beings. Children do not belong to the parents. Parents do not have absolute permission to do whatever they want with their children. They have responsibility, but they do not have ownership. Shabbat Shalom.